Hello and welcome back to Brian Wheeler, lead combat and PvP designer for the Elder Scrolls Online.
Hello.
Hello, you're here to talk to us about the early development of Cyrodiil, and welcome, should we say, the evolution of PvP in this game over the years.
Yeah.
Welcome, sir, and thank you once again for your time. How are you doing?
Hanging in there. It is Friday, so that's at least nice. We get to cap this off for this week, and then next week in the States, we only have a 4-day week.
Yeah. Welcome, sir, and thank you once again for your time. How are you doing? Of course it is.
Hanging in
Yeah.
there,
Well,
yeah.
happy 4th of July, a little bit early.
Thank you.
We'll do our
Next week
best
is
to-
also another Vengeance run, so that'll be fun.
Oh, that's true.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah. Yeah, we were literally just talking about that. Well, there is a lot to talk about. We'll do our best to send you off in style, but let's be honest, PvP is a huge topic, and people definitely have some strong opinions on this. As you say, we've also got a new Vengeance campaign coming on Monday, which we will try to touch on later, but let's park all that for now and rewind all the way back to when you were at Mythic, working on Dark Age of Camelot, Warhammer Online.
Okay.
That means you knew people like Matt Firor and Mike Finnegan before you started at ZOS,
Here.
correct?
Yeah. That was Finnegan actually was part of my interview process for going to Mythic. I kind of did it the old school way where you had to get your foot in the door either by being like a tester or an in-game support agent. And that was me. I was one of the little gems that would help you out if you got stuck in terrain or somebody was harassing you or your house got repossessed. I was nicknamed the Repo Man for a while. But yeah, Mike was actually one of the guys that interviewed me at Mythic in the first place.
Oh, that's amazing. We got
Yeah.
Gareth,
That's fun.
Gareth Yolnir here saying Dark Age of Camelot beta player here in chat.
Oh,
Wow.
nice. Sweet. Yeah, I did a little bit of that like while I was doing the third party testing stuff. Some of us got into the beta for Dark Age, so when midnight hit and our shift ended, we were like, all right, let's fire up Dark Age beta and play.
Amazing.
So yeah, good times. Known a lot of people. There's beyond just like Mike and Matt, there's a lot of world builders or world artists, terrain fixture artists that came from Mythic that came over. A lot of producers. One of the producers I've worked with, Yvette and Yvonne.
Yeah.
Worked with them for forever too.
Yvette is awesome. We really wanted to make her part of the 10 Fest, but I guess that wasn't possible. She's also pretty high up the chain of command, so
Yeah, producers are pretty busy.
yeah,
They're the ones who kind of wrangle us crazies, the producers. They're like, all right, look, I know you want to make some wild stuff, but it's got to fit in this time schedule. You need these resources, and they kind of keep us sane. So
Yeah.
it's kind of nice to have the producers around to keep us in check.
I bet they
They're
also
the-
have good stories.
Yeah, they're the left brains of the gears out there, where they're like, okay, it's got to fit in this time box, this schedule, and they're really good at keeping us on track. And also, like, if we have scope blow up, they'll be the first to be like, that's out of scope, that's going to push it out. And
Right.
we appreciate everything they do for sure, especially like, again, Yvette and Yvonne. I've worked with them for forever, so.
And can you point to anything specific that you were doing back then that sort of qualified you and gave you the track record to jump in, and they said, right, here's PvP, go?
So let's see. I was at Dark Age for about a year and a half, doing the customer service in-game stuff. I kind of went up those ranks relatively quickly, and there was an opening for somebody to make items, and I kind of applied for that, and that's actually where I met Yvonne for the first time too. And she was like, all right, well, let's have you make some items. Let's see if you're stupid or not, for lack of a better way to word it. And at the time, they gave me Hibernia's weapons to make, and I played a ranger, so I was like, all right, sweet, I'm going to make really good gear for me to go get. And when the expansion came out, I think this was Catacombs.
Right, yep.
Yeah, Catacombs was after Trials of Atlantis, and people were like, oh my god, the gear on this side for Midgard and Hibernia is really, really good. What happened to Albion? And then they were like, okay, well, maybe you do know what you're doing. So they had me rework Albion's gear. And then after a while, they were like, you have a website on Rangers, don't you? And I was like, yes. Like, well, you can't update that anymore. But since you seem to know what you're talking about, how about trying to like make a zone, see if that works? And that worked out really well. And then I started working with somebody named Jen Ortiz, and she was kind of like in the position that I was trying to get to, which was class lead or combat at that point.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
she helped on ramp me into the world of class development. So I started with items and then went to class development, and from there, it was like, well, you're not messing this up. Let's give you some bigger things like battleground design or realm abilities, and worked on those. And that was sort of like the on ramping, like really how things sort of took off. I used to have meetings with engineers, and they would tell me what is and what isn't possible. That's kind of where I learned like my first physics test, as it were, from Ed Tafo. He was like, I know you want to make all this stuff, but our engine doesn't support that, and all this stuff has to still obey physics going through the tubes of electrons, so you can't overflow it. And that echoes all the way through to today, where I tell people about performance. But yeah, I think that was sort of like the big kickoff into like where I am today, with being able to work on class combat and be able to work on PvP at the same time. And then Warhammer was like, we need you to come over and do what you were doing on Dark Age with the PvP side, and like making battleground zones and making the open lakes and things like that. So I shifted over from Dark Age to there, and then from there to here.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
this is Warhammer.
May I
Warhammer
just
Online,
interrupt,
Age of
Khan?
Reckoning.
Just
Yeah,
really
yeah.
quickly, I just wanted to welcome Raider Sainira. Thank you so much. And guys, you couldn't have come in at a better time. We've got Brian Wheeler, lead PvP and combat designer, here with us, talking to us about PvP. So welcome in.
Nice. Welcome to the Insane Asylum.
Yeah, welcome on in. That's literally what I was going to say, Maya, but you did it much better. So
Thank you.
if anyone's wondering, that's Warhammer Online Age of Reckoning, which I actually played. I got the collector's edition sitting under my desk right now.
I still have my books upstairs, I think.
Yeah, it's sad that it didn't last longer, but it was pretty good. It got really well reviewed,
Yeah.
and it does mean that a bunch of people came over to work on ESO instead. So when you did join the ESO team, PvP was your remit from the very beginning because of
From
what
the
you've just
jump.
talked about. You'd had your hands on the process of stats and balance and all of this stuff, and you dinged a few successes scaling up your responsibility. What state was PvP even in at that point? I know we're talking like drawing board. What sort of goals or vision did they have?
The only thing that was really laid out at that time in 2009 was, we know it's going to be 3-sided. It's going to be the 3 banners, and it was going to be the races were sort of already decided who was going to be in Ebonheart, Daggerfall, and Aldmeri, and that was kind of it. Like that was all that was really there. Matt kind of gave me the directive of, we want Camelot 2.0 to a degree, but we want a modern spin on it. We want to know what's going to be best for that. We know we want siege warfare. We know we want keeps, but outside of that, kind of sky's the limit. Like I got to pick where it was going to be, after, lots and lots of meetings, obviously, but like at the start, it was just a paragraph or two of, it's a 3-banner war, and that's kind of about it. It was like, just go. I was like, okay. So it was pretty blank slate, which is, what everybody dreams of, obviously. But also there's a lot of weight associated with that. I think I remember at one point, I want to say, after we kind of had the direction established, and I'm skipping ahead, which we may rewind back to what I'm talking about now, but there was a point where I think Yvonne told me during the interview process, Matt went to Yvonne and was like, can you really do this? Because I was only like 33 at the time. And I had only been, making battlegrounds and the PvP lakes, not just like a massive war zone before this. but they had faith in me, and I appreciated that every single step of the way. And now we got a really, really kick-ass PvP system that doesn't exist anywhere else, which
No.
is great.
It's unique, absolutely. Well, one of the
Yeah.
first things that struck me when I ventured into Cyrodiil is that, they can kill me, but also the sheer
Yeah.
freaking size. Like, it's so much
Yes.
bigger than any other zone. So how did you arrive at that particular scale?
So we knew we were going to be third person initially, and then we added first person later on. But we spent a lot of time in Oblivion, or I did a lot of time in Oblivion, and the sheer cliffs that exist. Like, everybody's played Oblivion. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people are playing Oblivion Remastered now, running around and being like, "Oh yeah, I get this," and it's way prettier now, obviously, with a remaster. But back in the day, running around on those like North Shores, where the cliffs are just like this, we were like, okay, this is, we can't have PvP in this. Plus the scale of it, to have the amount of people we wanted in there, and having sort of like the grand scale, it had to be stretched. It had to be bigger. And kind of the process for that actually was, we got what's called a height map from Bethesda directly of Cyrodiil. And it took a little bit to get to we're going to do Cyrodiil as well. We were kind of talking at one point of maybe just making the PvP Imperial Island itself, and making the provinces, around it actually be just PvE zones. But it was like, no, we want it to be bigger, grander. And that's where like we started to chew into the space outside of Imperial Island. But we got a height map, which is basically a grayscale overhead topographical view, and imported that into our engine. And it was maybe the size of one of our battleground zones. Like, when we imported it, the scale was all off. I was like, oh crap, this is gonna be difficult.
That would have been interesting.
So yeah, we were like, let's stretch this thing out. And what we ended up doing, I had to import like chunks of it bit by bit by bit, and we got it stitched together in the game eventually. And all it was just our like checkerboard terrain or look, and it was just like spread out and kind of rough, because when you do a grayscale import, when you're looking at like how much a pixel changes the terrain, it can make a piece of terrain that's the size of a pixel on the import the size of a football field. So there would be like, big chunks of flat space, and then a little raise and a chunk of flat space. So we had the basics of it, but we had to go in there and like smooth things out, terraform it to make it be an experience that you can run over. Because for me, that was one of the bigger things as well, that there wasn't going to be a lot of terrain that you'd like run into a sheer wall. You're like, shit, now I got to go around this thing. Like that's great when you're trying to guide people through content, but when you're trying to have, this open sandboxy feel, you want to have as few of those as possible. But yeah, that like the start of it was importing that grayscale and then building from there. But that took probably about a month minimum to get that. I still have all those old files too.
But it's literally
Nice.
the OG Cyrodiil from Oblivion that it was built on.
And
That's
just
really
stretched
cool.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had stretch it way out, obviously. And then it was funny too, like we started importing the fixtures as well. And, obviously again, we're looking at the fixtures from Oblivion, old school Xbox 360. And when we brought in like Cloud Ruler Temple, it was like, oh god, this looks terrible. Because like we're, higher res, more polys, and we were like, okay, well, let's try upscaling that and see if that can work. And we had to rebuild that, so we ended up just rebuilding a lot of fixtures, which was kind of fun as well too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you actually like first realize? Okay, so like this 3-side open world PvP could be super cool and unique.
I realized that playing Dark Age. Because like I cut my teeth on MMO PvP in EverQuest, going back to
Yeah.
the chessboard, not the chessboard in the wood elf slash dwarf area, but like in one of the volcanoes, and it was a PvP chessboard. I would run tournaments on my server. I'd be like, all right, you versus you, because as soon as you step on the board, it was your PvP flagged. So we would have to be like, okay, you and you get on the board and fight. And that was fun. But when I moved over to Dark Age and was like, whoa, three-sided really does change up the dynamic. The stalemates don't occur as often. There's an ebb and flow. There's very much a case where you can overextend yourself and have the third alliance go through or the third realm go through and take things out from you. So it added that other element to, like, at the point in time, Quake 2, Unreal Tournament, all those styles of PvP where it's just, old school capture the flag, deathmatch, yada yada. Having that third team really made it like ebb and flow and almost be like a wheel of who's on top at any given time. And what sold it internally at ZeniMax so I had to make a board game of Cyrodiil. So I had this big, had to be like that big of a hex layout, and I drew in the Superman and lay down keeps, and we used little Risk figures to have
Oh, no
you
way.
That's
move.
amazing.
We had like Magic the Gathering gem counters for like, this is your reserves to have you come in or not come in. We would have you claim keeps, take over keeps, and then moving a hex was 1 square if you were not having a mount. If you had a mount, you move 2 squares. So we did this like massive paper prototype, and every time we played it, people were like, yeah, this can work. We see what you're talking about, how like you push in too deep and then these guys come take you and then you got to retreat to go get it. But then we took that and put it into Warcraft 3. So that one had an engine where you could, make your own custom things, and we did the same thing in there. So people could, play at the computer, and we would have peons and knights fighting, and we kind of simulated that fight there. And the same thing proved true, where if you push out and overextend, there's fights in multiple places. So it kind of got proven from there. But I knew three-sided, like, massive warfare, like, when I got to 50 in Dark Age and started really diving into the Realm War, I was like, this is badass.
You
Yeah.
knew it was going to work.
Yep.
Yeah, it was really cool.
That's awesome.
That's super cool to think about, you plotting it out as like a tactical,
I know, right?
like a strategic layout like that. Because Maya actually did we won't go into it, but you did a really in-depth video last year, right, Maya, about how Ciro actually works, how it's scored and everything. And honestly, we've been playing the game for ages. We learned a lot just from clarifying these things,
Just
how
digging into
exactly
it.
the cooldown, the system is really robust and kind of fun, and you don't need to know all that stuff. The
But
vast
it's
majority
cool
of
to know,
players
yeah.
do not, but yeah, it is there.
And well, I was kind of curious. Can you think of any other like cool, crazy ideas that were tossed around during the development, good or bad ones?
We had talked about things like flagging PvE zones to be PvP, like
Ooh.
letting you overworld flag yourself. But the modern audience kind of, I don't think, would jive with that too well. Like, most people want to, especially an Elder Scrolls audience, especially also knowing what we know now with how people play ESO, a lot of people just want a quest, just run around and do the trade skilling, talk with their buddies, hang out with their friends. A lot of people wanted, Oblivion Online, or obviously at the time Skyrim Online, and having PvP forced upon you, a lot of people don't like it.
They can just go to Bergama, and on PCEU anyway. That's where people go to Duel.
Right, yeah. So it was very much a case of understanding where the game world is going and trying to be like, okay, no, recognizing trends that some people just want to chill, just play and just relax, and not have to be like, oh shit, looking over the shoulder. Like, I know that that's a really cool aspect of other MMOs where you can open flag yourself and be like, come at me, bro, I don't care. But it also does open up griefing opportunities. It can be nightmare fuel, especially if you could kill the NPCs that are giving out quests, because then people would be like, well, what the hell, this is broken.
Yeah.
So there were things that we talked about like that, which were in vogue at the time, whether it be parts of other MMOs or just ideas that exist from other games that are PvP oriented. But we were like, you know what? Let's make PvP a voluntary aspect. Let's make it something where going into it, it's like, I'm gonna die. But it's gonna be as not painless, but as little pain as possible when you die, because that's always a fun one where people go into games and they expect to not die in PvP, but then they do and they flip out. It's like, no, we want to avoid that. So
Yeah, you got to make your peace with that.
yeah, that's one of the things that when we were doing our playtests internally, I was like, you are going to die. Like, it's not like PvE where you're the champion and you're the hero and you're winning all the time. Cyrodiil, like, you are a soldier. You're a grunt. You can do fantastical powers and stuff, but you're part of the war machine.
You are expendable. Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of playtests and the whole Skyrim online aspect, we touched on this the other day. I'm guessing you guys were constantly jumping into fights and testing the version of PvP that you had currently in those early days, right?
Yeah, so getting Cyrodiil built was one massive project. Another project was proving out PvP in general, just the general, combat. And I had made some makeshift battlegrounds, like they don't exist now. They're just like makeshift things to try and improve certain aspects that were going to go in Cyrodiil, like capturing a keep is a good example of this, or capturing a resource where it's flag based. A lot of people always ask, well, why isn't there a big bad to kill? And we saw from Warhammer and from Dark Age that could be exploited. People could, tag the keep boss, pull him outside, get him stuck. It would fall through the world and the keep can't be flipped. So we were like, I don't want to do that. And I think that the 1942 example, or what I call the 1942 example, is standing in the perimeter of a flag. The flag lowers, the flag raises, and then you have it. That's in 1942. I mean, like the EA game, 1942. I played a bunch of that. That was another example of like mass warfare that I was like, yeah, this is it. Like that initial vibe. But how they have you take objectives where you stand next to the flag and you can see it change, I found that way more engaging, because it's not only giving you an opportunity to clear out the NPCs to then stand on the flag, but it gives you a push and pull to any enemy players that are defending that flag. So we had small battlegrounds built where we could test out those aspects. And in those aspects, we did have 3 teams that would spawn up, so we could even test, even in that small scale, what's it like with 3 teams of 5 or 3 teams of 6 beating on each other, trying to capture 1 point. And then on top of that, too, we had other spaces for like capture the flag to figure out movement. How fast do we want people to move in PvP, or are there abilities we give people temporarily that let them, boost their speed? Sounds familiar. So it's looking at all those types of mini components that we tested out as we were also building Cyrodiil at the same time. So those playtests were pretty busy in those early days, for sure. We didn't involve like the whole company in the tests until we needed to, until we were like, yeah, we need numbers to really test this stuff out. So before then, it was pretty much like a lot of 8-on-8, 10-on-10 territory to try and prove out stuff.
And it sounds like those must have been the starting point for Battlegrounds, because easy to forget, the game did not launch with any PvP except Dueling
Zero.
and Zero.
Well, dueling didn't come until later. Dueling didn't come
really?
until
I wasn't even aware of that.
after Battlegrounds. So it was Cyrodiil first, then Imperial City,
Yeah.
then Battlegrounds, and then
In
Dueling.
2017. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So that was the order of how it all came out. And obviously, Imperial City, we thought about having that be part of Cyrodiil at first, but we just didn't have time to get that in for launch, as well as everything else that had to be done with Cyrodiil, which is why Imperial City came out like quickly after the game released.
Yeah. It worked really well, actually.
Mhm.
It's like low key one of my favorite DLCs is that
Oh, I
a
love
pair of
running around
dungeons
Imperial.
and the IC
Mhm.
unique zone. Oh no, we got another raid from Bethesda, Netherlands.
Hey, there you go.
Wow. Welcome
Nice.
on in, Raiders. Thank you all for joining us. We are
Hey.
here with Brian Wheeler, lead PvP and combat designer
Hi.
at ZeniMax Online Studios, talking to us about PvP.
PvP, yes.
Is the PvP day of the 10 Fest Raid Train, day 5. And I was just going to ask you, Brian, about something you already talked briefly about the other day
Yeah.
from a PvE standpoint. When you made that switch from the early MMO combat that ESO had, the old school, where
Mhm.
you would lock onto targets, and in the words of Matt Fyraw, you played the UI, you didn't play the game world. And then
Mhm.
after Skyrim launched, you realized, oh, we got to do a
We gotta do
complete
it.
overhaul, reticle-based system with action, movement. How did that change the feel of PvP gameplay as you were implementing it and you were testing it?
Got a lot faster. I wasn't in charge of combat at the time. It was so from that perspective, I was looking at it like, okay, what do I need to change, if anything? At that point, we were pretty far along with the Cyrodiil world building and development. And really, the only initial concern I had was how fast it was going to be instead of what it was with like traditional tab targeting, being able to lock on your target and like wherever you go, I still have you targeted. The change to the action base was going to make it way more twitchy for people. And that's when I was like, there's probably going to be a bit of a barrier here for some people to get into
Right.
PvP. And, we talked about that at length, but we also knew that was going to be what was going to set us apart. We weren't just going to be another MMO with tab targeting. We knew it was going to, A, make us distinct, unique. B, it was going to be very Elder Scrollsy feel. That's how all the other Elder Scrolls games are. They're an RPG. They're a shooter masquerading as an RPG when you really boil it down. So we knew that was going to set us up and be different. But we didn't at the time know how much that was going to impact performance at the time. We knew it was going to be a hit, but we didn't know when we made the switch how much more in depth we were going to need to make the abilities, or how complex the abilities were going to need to be to make up for the fact of being on a controller. You can't do as many distinct short ability usage bits that are just like it's just a knockdown, or it's just a root, or it's just a DD. With only having 12 abilities at your disposal, we were like, we need to add more to the abilities, especially for PvE play, where we were planning on more intricate encounter designs that were going to require you to have more tools in your belt. So at that point in time when we switched, we didn't know how big of a perf impact it was going to be. We knew it was going to be something, but also we were like, well, we know that it's a bigger win for us to switch to this combat mode. So we did. And I'm glad that we did. It has been, obviously a bit of a patch to try and get the performance nailed down. And we've tried all these other things, but luckily, I think we got we struck the proper chord when we got Vengeance out for that first test. We were like, ooh, this is what it should have been. This is
Yeah.
what we could have had the capability to do. And you can see with the simplified abilities that it is less math going through the server. So it's like, okay, this is what we wanted. We wanted this massive warfare. And you know, I'm looking forward to next week to get back in there and do that again at like that grand scale.
Yeah, me too. We've actually got some of my footage playing, pre-recorded footage from the first
yeah?
Cyrodiil Vengeance
Nice.
test playing next to your cam, but much
Oh, I gotta
smaller,
watch.
obviously. But
Now I gotta watch.
it's nothing special. The main reason I started filming was these are massive groups of mounts, people just charging in like the Ride of the
Mhm.
Rohirrim.
Yeah.
That's cool. That never gets old. But yeah, so I agree. That was a great decision. While some people expected Skyrim Online and were a little bit confused or dismayed by the way the combat system worked, I think it's kept so many people here. We talked about this on Combat Day. But Maya, if you don't mind, we skip ahead. Since you already brought it up, we have to talk about Cyrodiil performance, partly because
Yeah.
everyone watching would revolt.
Part of
if
the
we didn't.
history. It's
But
part of the
also,
history.
yeah, it absolutely is. But also because it's very current. It's something you're not always able to discuss, not what you want to dwell on during a big reveal. But now with Cyrodiil Vengeance, you have talked a lot more about this issue, showing and explaining some stats to us, which is great. So it's fair to say you've set the scene. Cyrodiil is very much your baby. How has it been for you to see it held back by server performance?
Hard. It's been a slog to do it, but it's one of those things where I have faith that the company was gonna get there. Like we were gonna solve it because it is so unique. It is just this different experience that doesn't exist anywhere else. Like you could say that you know, EVE Online has massive warfare as well, but like it's not the same. It's not like your avatar on horseback, Ride of the Rohirrim, charge into a keep vibe. Like, and we had it in beta, and I was like, yeah, this is it. And we had it for a little bit after launch, but then the performance started tailing off, and we had to keep changing the population. And when we first started noting the performance issues, like we need to fix this. Obviously, we were like, well, what can we do tech wise? What can we do server bandwidth? Are there abilities that are doing cranky things? And you know, over the years, we had you know somewhat adjusted some abilities. We had logs that we would get from some of our engineers, like Ed, who I worked with back in Dark Age, where I know he would find the right abilities and be like, that ability is crap. We need to fix that. And we would try rescripting them to get them to be better. But I mean, we're talking a drop of rain into a Home Depot bucket that's full of water. It's like it's not going to push the needle. But we were trying to slowly bail that bucket out. But on the flip side of that, obviously, we have to keep adding new systems. We got to keep adding to the game. So it's this push and pull that, you know, I liked the fact that we were expanding Elder Scrolls and making more features, more cool things for players. But I knew the whole time it was like, this has a cost, and that cost is going to be Cyrodiil perf. And through the years, we still kept trying to handle that stuff, either with some of the tests we did a couple years ago with like cooldowns and limiting healing, changing how many people can get hit with AEs and things like that.
Yep, I remember those. Yep.
But none of it hit the mark. And under the hood, I'm thinking we should just have the simplified abilities, because I can tell like that's the core issue. But getting the time and the bandwidth to do that, to actually get that stuff made, because you know, as we're going through these performance things, there's battlegrounds I had to redo. There's you know, Arcanist. There was helping out get Necro done. There was trying to when I took over combat in 2019, getting like standard supplied, and there's just a lot of places that I was getting pushed and pulled as well. So it was just a matter of getting the right resources and timing lined up to finally get to the point where we can say, let's do the simplified ability thing now. And when like Matt, Susan, Rich, and Adam, who's our lead engineer, he was like, let's try the thing. Let's try the simplified abilities and see how it goes. And we were given the green light to give it a whirl just on class abilities to start. And we're like, okay, let's see if you were right. And when it happened and we saw the perf graphs that I watched that we showed in one of those other streams, it was remaining steady, and we were like, ooh, I think we got it.
Yeah,
it was
it
was amazing, like seeing that happen.
it was very clear as well, even to somebody like me who doesn't necessarily understand or is used to dealing with all that stuff. But could
Mhm.
you? I know this is not the easiest thing, hence the test. But if you could just explain briefly and simply, so that my grandma could understand, how do these server bottlenecks occur?
I use like a basketball hoop analogy. It's kind of the best way I can give
Sure.
a visual for this. So when we first launched ESO, basketball hoop represents the throughput that a server can handle. And let's say going through the I'm trying to find a ball, but I don't have a ball nearby. So let's say you have like a baseball or a softball or a cricket ball. That can go through the hoop really easily, right? And that ball was a combination of things like your character record, or the size of your character, how much each ability press was taking with it, whether it was taking all your passes, your item choices, or any other overhead. As on launch, lots of balls could fit through there up until a point before the hoop would get clogged. As the game had more and more systems and abilities got more and more complex and item sets got more and more complex and champion points got added, that ball got bigger and bigger and bigger up to like, a softball, a basketball size, like an actual thing that would rattle around. Now you're trying to have that same character record get squeezed through that basketball hoop, but there's lots of basketballs trying to go through at the same time because in Cyrodiil everybody's beating the crap out of each other. So it was like that hoop was just not big enough.
Yeah.
When we added the new hardware, that sort of gave a bit of relief, but it still didn't get to the underlying problem, which was just how big the character records and how big the math was trying to cram through that hoop. So that's where we're like, okay, let's make the character records smaller. Let's make the math smaller. And that worked. Now everybody's the size of a marble going through that hoop, as opposed to everybody being the size of a baseball when we launched. At least, in Cyrodiil, in the Vengeance version, where your abilities are tailored down to the simplistic, and you're not worried about the overhead of like all these other systems that are hanging about, like outfit system or CP or any of this type of stuff that has like character load.
Yeah,
so
that's a good analogy.
That's the best I can give you on that analogy.
Yeah.
That's very good. And we've got Kazi in chat saying,
Yeah.
so what I'm hearing is performance issue is caused because of two big balls.
Let's say three, because 3 sides, 3 alliances. So there you go. There you go, even better.
Balls too big, yeah. And
Hoop too small. Yeah.
And how long is it roughly that you've been working? Because you said even when the previous round of tests ages ago were happening, you were thinking, no, we just need to have a more templatized, simplified version. How long have you been campaigning for Vengeance and working on this?
I've been campaigning for Perf, for Cyrodiil in general, since the first Battleground days.
That's 8
the OG
years.
Battleground. Yeah, for a long time. If you want to, get pedantic, since launch, when we first started toning down the population, I've been like, we need to fix this. We need to fix this. But again, it's resources, timing, and it's one of those things where you could always be like, well, I was the one who said we should have been doing this the whole time. No, it's a big team effort, and it's always a case where if you can get the right people working on it at the right time, it goes quick. And when we got the green light, it was last fall. Yeah, last fall. I was working on subclassing at the time as well, and we were just getting Battlegrounds out the door, Battlegrounds two-sided out the door, and it was like, do the thing. We're like, okay. So we were lucky that we had a good bunch of people around that were already, working on ability stuff with subclassing as well as coming off of scribing. So we had a good core of developers who knew the abilities inside and out and how to like trim them real quick and easy. We had an engineer or two that also was extremely familiar. Jonathan was digging into abilities like way deeper than had been done before because of the scribing system and with subclassing as well to make sure we're not breaking anything. And then we just had the right alignment of time where it was like, let's go. But I mean, even back in 2019 when I took over combat, that had been one of the initiatives is where if you look at like some of the patch cycles where we say we rescripted area effects, that was when John had been making new tech for us to redo how we actually build area effect abilities and how they trigger. So it's always been something that I've been pushing for performance in general, whether it's Cyrodiil, because I mean Trials, they have issues as well from time to time.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, so it's always been a fight for the studio to make sure it's worked. But for Cyrodiil and me specifically, like since the first time we got a lower population, I was like, well, then we need to fix this. Because that area, that space works best when it's full of people. When it's
absolutely
a lower population, then you don't get the back captures, you don't get the deep strikes, you don't get fights occurring in multiple locations. You don't get those random, okay, the Zerg is right there, they're not paying attention to me and this Nightblade, we're going to beat the crap out of each other before they come over here. But like when it's a smaller population, it's like the fight is right here, that's it.
Yeah, and you run into the same people. That's not what Cyrodiil is
supposed to be. Right.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be mass warfare. And if you run across familiar names in that mass warfare, then it's really special. It's like, oh, I remember fighting you at Chalman 2 weeks ago. That was cool. As opposed to, okay, I just killed you a half hour ago. Let's go again. So the numbers gets a lot of that psychological benefit as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you heard it here, chat. It's been 8 years Brian Wheeler's been working on this and campaigning for this, and it's culminating right now.
But it's good. It's if anything, it's also a testament to the studio not wanting to just completely blow up what people have been attached to. It's why it's kind of taken a while to do it as well, because we're we don't want to just say this is two separate games entirely. Screw it. Like there's still that glue. It's like, well, what you're doing here works in here. What you're not doing there. So it's been slow and steady in terms of trying to progress towards getting to where we are with Vengeance. And this was mentioned, I guess, the other day with the stream with me, Jess, and Gina. Like, what is the end game? Everybody's always asking that, and your chat's probably asking that now too.
Yeah,
I mean, the end game is getting Cyrodiil to be massive warfare. That is the end game. It's always been the goal. It was what we wanted on launch. We've had to curtail that, obviously, for performance reasons, and we're going to do whatever we can to get Cyrodiil to be that massive warfare experience, because it is unique. It doesn't exist anywhere else, and we want to make sure that, I don't say we're going to corner it, but we definitely we got something special, and we need to fan that flame now that we know it can work. And that's partly what next week's test is going to be too, is ensuring that the first one wasn't a fluke.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens next week when we get the weapon lines and the assault and the support out there. Again, they are going to operate a little bit differently, but it's all in the favor of performance.
Yeah, and we understand that is not an easy knot to unravel But we all wish you success in making Cyrodiil the best version of itself.
Thanks.
I was going to ask what you were hoping to learn from this second test starting on Monday, but you just answered that. So, longer term, is it right to say, because this is what people come who don't necessarily understand what the Vengeance tests are for, so I want to make sure I give a good account of
Mhm.
what they should think about this. Is it fair to say this is about finding the sweet spot between complexity and stability? So the server isn't overwhelmed with the mathematics of a million things per second, but still having that zero experience, which is very dynamic and not the stripped down, some would say dumbed down version we've seen in Vengeance tests 1 and 2. Is that fair?
It's a matter of finding a balance between what you're saying there, the performance, complexity, as well as player choice. Like, we know that one of the main pillars of Elder Scrolls is play the way you want, play with some choice, and have some customization options. And we know that right now these tests are just the stripped down, simple versions, especially the first one. Everybody was like, "Oh my god, I should only do mag because it's all class abilities and they are 90% mag based."
Yeah.
So now, we're obviously introducing weapon lines to give some of that variety back, to be like, okay, let's see how stamina vibes for people and see if they still have those concerns about, I don't have enough build variety, I don't have enough uh, dominion over my character. Like, we want dominion, huh? But just that concept where you can build a character out the way you want, but there is a balance there of like, what we give you can't be complex. We do want to give you options and do make it so that you feel like you're in control of your character, but the options that we give you, we have to be real careful with, because
Yeah.
as soon as you start diving into things triple procking, or things having like a opportunity that on one button hit, this could happen or that could happen or that could happen, just depending upon timers. All that stuff has overhead, and that's what we're trying to like balance out. And some abilities are a little bit more complex than we even want for these tests. Like, some of the engineers came back like, why do some of those abilities do like two things or three things? We're like,
Yeah.
and the first test and even this test coming up, we're still pretty restricted on what we wanted to do to make sure that we're not running afoul of adding extra crap that we don't need to add. This is why things like what one of our testers has aptly named the Necro Backpack. That's why it's the way it is. It's just this little spirit that pops up behind you.
Yeah.
And we had to do that to keep the same effects, so people kind of had some visual of what's going on. But the old way of how that ability worked was just too complex. Siege Shield is kind of another example I give for what's coming up, where it's not going to put a bubble and it's not going to sit there. You're going to have to hit it, and it's going to be something that lasts for a couple seconds and then goes away, and you got to hit it again. So it's very much a change in the functionality purely for perf. But end game here is getting a good balance between customization for players, giving progression again, because like right now everybody's saying things like, well, what's the point? There's no leaderboards, there's no emperorship, there's no keep bonuses, there's no no looting, no this. So obviously we want to keep looking down ways to make sure that there is progression for your characters as well as your account, and all that also has overhead. So it's a matter of trying to find that balance of massive warfare and letting you have some control over your character, your customization options, what you're using, what you're building, and giving you the options to, I would say, have a fair fight is the other really big thing that kind of slips through the cracks about Vengeance. But once you start playing it, one of the things you said there that a lot of people did say was, oh my god, this is dumbed down. But an analogy I can give for this is a designer I worked with before at Mythic. He was kind of on the same par as me with like our mentality about player versus player games and sort of like a broader view Not just like, I hit this button and I beat you. Sort of like the psychology and the sociology of it all. One of the things we talk about, which we would talk about over playing chess, would be how chess and checkers, Othello, um, poker, like these are all games that are actually PvP, because really that's when you're actually playing the other person. You both have the same gear, you both have the same access to stuff. I guess you could say maybe it's unfair in chess because one color goes first or checkers, but I mean, flip a coin and then you negate that. But when everybody has access to the same stuff, that's when it's really the most PvP, and that's when it's truly player versus player, not player versus you've been playing since launch and you have access to all this gear, you have your shit golded out, you are CP'd up the wazoo, and there's no way in hell me just jumping in is going to have an opportunity against you. You're just going to wipe the floor with me in about 5 or 6 globals.
Yeah.
And what Vengeance does, it really it flattens that. It doesn't negate it entirely, but it does make it so that Alec, example, could go up against somebody that's fresh in our QA department, has never played PvP before, and that QA player doesn't feel like they just got curb stomped by someone who's been playing the game for forever, because they're on a relatively equal footing with their stats and with their ability usage. This is kind of in a way playing out with subclassing to a degree, where you're like, well, I can switch over to this ability and this ability because now I have the freedom to switch skill lines out. So that's one of those other, sort of like the third pillar. We were talking about performance, customization, progression. The last one is fair play. That right now, think about going to your local soccer field or football field or baseball field or a basketball court. If you go up there and you see some people playing a pickup game, and they just kind of look like regular people, no problem. You're like, okay, I'll play. You'll go in there and play and feel like you were competitive and having fun. Now, if you go to that same court and you see somebody in Jordans, a sweatbands, a basketball jersey, they got 5 racks of Gatorade on the side.
Yeah, pro team gear.
It's like, whoa, I don't want to play these guys. That's kind of what we're talking about here for an analogy of Vengeance. Kind of lets you dip your toe into it a little bit more, and you're not feeling necessarily like you're going to get curb stomped every single time. And the chat kind of reflected that too.
Also, it's more of a skill thing, right? So it's everybody's sort of similar.
Skill.
Yeah, exactly. Not like the set or something.
Right. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because as someone who plays ESO an awful lot, but I don't have a ton of time to do PvP. I really love it. I really admire it. I wish I had more time for it, but I'm a Trials and Dungeons first and foremost kind of guy, and I really enjoyed.
I love killing people though.
Not sucking so much in Vengeance, because the advantage, it's not an unfair advantage, but it is there, that my friends have over me in terms of their builds. They're better than mine. Mine's are often it's out of date, or it hasn't been through as many iterations as they, where they're playing it all the time. So all of that was suddenly wiped, and I felt the difference. So maybe, I think, I'm just glad you mentioned it. I'm not saying that people who are super experienced should be ignored. Of course not. Definitely not.
They still have their advantage for sure, because they're so used to the mechanics and the anim canceling and the weapon swap and drinking your potions at the proper time. Like, there's still a game knowledge advantage there. And that gets to the skill aspect of things. The skill is your knowledge as well as your mechanical execution. So I think that one of the things I saw in chat often was when people were like, oh my God, there's no skill in this anymore. People were like, what do you mean? This is purely a skill game now, because they have the same stuff that we have. Now it's going to we'll see how that response is with the weapon lines being added. But again, they're simplified versions and everybody's going to have access to them. So it's very much a case of, you made your pawn across the way of the chessboard, queen me. It's like that type of thing. It's like, okay, you had a two-hander. I'm going to bust out sword and board now. So I'm going to be able to block some more and handle things like your crits charge. So I think it's I think it's almost more of a skill-based game now when things are. I'm using the word flat, but you know what I mean, on a
Yeah.
more equal
Yeah.
playing field. Yeah.
Yeah. So beyond Vengeance, what else can you tell us about your current focus? Any plans for BGs? Anything else you can talk about?
I want to make sure that we revisit Battlegrounds because I know there's been consternation since the two-sided launch about the team size filling. Um, we are trying to work with engineers about that. We do want to get back to expanding, making more maps, making more game modes, but I can't promise anything on that realm because obviously with Vengeance being a bigger focus right now, Cyrodiil's like the crown jewel of PvP and
Yeah.
Elder Scrolls. But I'll always fight for Imperial City. I'll always fight for Battlegrounds.
I love IC.
Dueling is kind of a as is scenario because we do know that there's cases where like, oh, they can heal me from outside when they drop a ground thing, but like just move away from people and don't deal with that. But yeah, like I want to have more maps because when we cut back from 3-sided to 2-sided, I think we went down 3 maps comparatively. So obviously, I would like to get more of those. We do want to look at things like we know that there's spawn camping issues and that some teams just bail. They're like, nah, we're not going to deal with this and we're going to leave. So I definitely want to get back to visiting that. I definitely want to get Cyrodiil back in massive warfare mode. So there's a lot of focus being split, obviously, across PvP and combat here. And again,
lots to do. Yeah, that's the one thing
lots to do. Yeah,
the one thing I'm definitely getting from all the interviews we've done over the week is how the hell does anything get done? Because there is so much that you guys, the processes.
Mm-hmm.
You have to talk to that team, and then it just and it happens, and it's kind of feels like magic a little bit, but yeah.
It's a lot of diligence and a lot of, especially on the PvP front, like not giving up. Like,
yeah,
Superman's coming out. I hope is a real thing. Like, I've never given up. I will never give up on PvP. I will keep pushing on that as much as I possibly can, in any front that I possibly can get it in. Whether it's
awesome.
Cyrodiil, IC, BGs, and there are sometimes people may be like, that's kind of a bit zealous. I'm like, I gotta fight for it. It's in my DNA. Like, it's this thing where ever since trying to get Quake LAN parties set up in college, I was like, nah, this is it. PvP's it. And like, it echoed through all my whole career of EverQuest trying to do PvP on a PvE server, Dark Age of Camelot running out there as a ranger and just like being in the wild, in the frontier. And Warhammer, just running around the lakes, twinking, doing the battlegrounds, and then in ESO, it's in my DNA, and I will always fight for PvP.
Love that.
Well, we appreciate it. And L-Dog commented a couple of minutes ago, perseverance is key. Yep. Good show, Brian Wheeler, dude. So just thought I'd read that.
I've got a question.
Appreciate that.
Yes. I've got a question for you from Mike Finnegan. So we had him on yesterday. How much time has Alessia Bridge spent destroyed?
Not enough. Not enough. Screw those yellow bananas trying to push into my territory. No. We'll keep blowing that thing up and I'll try forcing you all into the docks where I can pick you off one by one, coming across that crappy little makeshift boat bridge that we builded because we allowed stuff to be blown up.
Awesome.
If that isn't the most PvP answer it could give you, I don't know what.
That is brilliant.
I am in a PvP Discord where the Alessia Bridge fights are an absolute meme, and they just love it.
But we've got Bill here with us, Bill Slavichek tomorrow. Do you have a question for him?
Something cheeky.
Something cheeky, yeah.
I'm trying to think of something cheeky. Oh God. I could say one that would get me in trouble, but I could say, how much do the Easter eggs that Wheeler puts into Cyril and Imperial City drive him nuts?
Love it.
Because I sneak in a lot of stuff in those zones.
Let's do it. Can you tell us about any of those?
I
We
mean,
might not know about?
my dog is one of them, but also like there's in Imperial City, there's the Donkey Kong map. You guys know about that?
I do not know about this. No.
Yeah. That we have a Donkey Kong reference where it's the first map where it's the pillars like this, and just look it up, you'll see it. we have a Donkey Kong reference
in the
Imperial
sewers.
sewers. Uh-huh.
Ah, I'm sure that's known. It just passed me by. That's cool.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that one.
Sure. No problem. Well, sadly, it is 3:30.
It
and I
is,
need to
yeah,
jump to
absolutely.
Another
I was gonna
meeting
say-
where I'm gonna go talk about PvP actually. So
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Talk to us twice. Really appreciate it, going into so much detail. Thank you
no
so
problem.
much, and
Sure.
have a lovely afternoon. And see you in Ciro next week.
you as well. I'll be out there.
Yeah.
Catch you around.
Thanks again. Let's hear it for Brian Wheeler, everybody.
Later.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.
All right, so we're just gonna go to a BRB screen.